I am Melanie, 24 years old, and the first in my family to become a finalist for an international scholarship to Oxford. My sister Heather always resented my academic success, but I never thought she would go this far. When I discovered my passport missing 3 days before my life-changing interview, I felt my world collapsing. My parents stood in our living room, arms crossed, defending her. "Some opportunities aren't meant for everyone, Melanie," my father said coldly. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this betrayal months ago. Before I tell you how I turned this family betrayal into the greatest triumph of my life, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama stories resonate with you. Growing up in our modest suburban Boston home, I learned early that my academic achievements would never outshine my sister Heather's mediocrity in our parents' eyes. Heather is 3 years older, but the age gap felt like a canyon because of how differently we were treated. While I excelled in school, bringing home straight A's and academic awards, Heather struggled to maintain C's and showed little interest in education. Yet somehow, in our family's hierarchy, her needs and wants always took precedence. My earliest memory of this favoritism was my third-grade science fair. I had spent weeks building a working model of the solar system, carefully painting each planet, and calculating the proper proportions. The night before the fair, Heather needed poster board for a last-minute assignment she had procrastinated on. Without hesitation, my mother dismantled my project, salvaging the cardboard backing for Heather's work. "Your sister really needs this to pass her class," Mom explained as tears streamed down my face. "You'll get an A anyway. You always do." This pattern continued throughout our childhood. When I won the spelling bee in 5th grade, my parents missed it because Heather had a minor cold. When I was accepted into the gifted program, my father shrugged and said, "Just don't let it go to your head." Meanwhile, Heather's participation trophy for softball earned a prominent place on our mantle and a celebration dinner. Our working-class background meant resources were limited. Dad worked as a carpenter and Mom as a receptionist at a dental office. They stretched every dollar, but somehow there was always money for Heather's dance lessons, brand-name clothes, and later, her car. When it came to my academic competitions, music lessons, or college visits, I heard the same refrain, "We just can't afford extras right now." I worked my first job at 15 shelving books at the local library after school. By the time I entered community college, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs to pay my tuition. Meanwhile, Heather dropped out of her expensive state university after 3 semesters, moved back home, and received full financial support while she found herself working part-time at a boutique. Despite everything, I loved my family. That's the complicated truth that many people with difficult families understand. You can recognize the unfairness while still feeling connected by the invisible threads of blood and shared history. I made excuses for them for years. Dad had grown up with traditional values about women not needing higher education. Mom had never had opportunities herself and didn't know how to nurture them in me. Heather had been conditioned to expect preferential treatment. It was Dr. Larson, my community college psychology professor, who first made me see the situation clearly. After class one day, she asked why someone with my obvious intellectual gifts wasn't applying to more prestigious universities. "My family isn't really big on college," I said, the practiced excuse coming easily. "And what about what you're big on?" she countered, fixing me with a perceptive stare. That simple question cracked something open in me. For weeks afterward, I found myself examining my family dynamics through a new lens. I began to understand that I had been trained to minimize my achievements and diminish my dreams to maintain family harmony. Dr. Larson became my first true mentor, helping me transfer to a 4-year university with a substantial scholarship. In response to years of disappointment, I had developed skills that would prove invaluable. I became fiercely self-reliant, never counting on family support that might be withdrawn. I learned to think strategically, documenting everything important and creating backup plans for my backup plans. I kept my ambitions quiet, revealing them only after they were too established to be easily sabotaged. Most importantly, I began building a support network outside my family. At the center of this network was Taylor, whom I met in a literature class during my second year at university. Unlike Heather, who saw my academic prowess as a threat, Taylor celebrated my successes. When I stayed up all night finishing research papers, Taylor brought coffee and snacks. When I doubted myself, Taylor reminded me of how far I'd come. "Your family may never see your light," Taylor told me once, "but that doesn't mean you should dim it." By my senior year of college, I had created a life where my family's approval was no longer my primary source of validation. I had professors who championed my work friends who understood my value and a growing confidence in my own abilities. I had learned to navigate family gatherings with a protective emotional distance, sharing only sanitized versions of my achievements and keeping my deepest ambitions private. What I didn't realize was how this pattern of favoritism and sabotage would escalate when faced with my biggest opportunity, yet one that would make it impossible to maintain the pretense that we were just a normal family with minor disagreements. The Thornfield Fellowship wasn't just any scholarship. Awarded to only 5 American students annually, it provided full tuition to Oxford University, plus a generous living stipend for 3 years of graduate study. Beyond the financial support, which was substantial, the fellowship opened doors to a global network of academics, policymakers, and innovators. Past recipients had gone on to become UN ambassadors, Pulitzer Prize winners, and Nobel laureates. I hadn't planned to apply. Despite my academic success, imposter syndrome still whispered that such prestigious opportunities weren't meant for people like me. It was Professor Jenkins, my urban planning advisor, who insisted I submit my research on sustainable community development in post-industrial cities. "This work deserves a broader platform," he said, sliding the application across his desk. "Your perspective as someone who's lived in these transitioning communities brings something unique to the academic discourse." The application process was rigorous. A 20-page research proposal, 3 academic essays, 5 letters of recommendation, and a portfolio of my previous work. I spent months refining every element, working late into the night after finishing my shifts at the campus library and the local coffee shop. I told no one in my family what I was doing, having learned long ago that their lack of enthusiasm could deflate even my strongest resolve. When the email arrived announcing I was one of 15 finalists selected for in-person interviews, I stared at my phone in disbelief for a full 5 minutes before calling Taylor. "I knew it," Taylor screamed through the phone. "Did I not tell you? Did I not say your research was groundbreaking?" The validation from the selection committee, accomplished scholars who had no reason to believe in me except the quality of my work, felt like oxygen after years of breathing the thin air of family indifference. Eventually, I had to share the news with my family. I chose to do it at Sunday dinner, hoping the presence of pot roast might cushion whatever reaction came. "That's interesting," my mother said after a long pause. "Oxford is in England, right? That's very far away." "Way to go, Brainiac," Heather said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Guess all those books paid off." My father focused on cutting his meat. "These fancy scholarships usually go to people from important families. Don't get your hopes up." "I'm already a finalist, Shay," I clarified, "out of hundreds of applicants." "Well, don't forget where you came from if you end up in that ivory tower," my father said. "Some people get these opportunities and suddenly think they're too good for their families." It was a familiar dynamic acknowledgement wrapped in warning congratulations, laced with preemptive resentment. I had expected nothing more, yet the disappointment still stung. As the interview date approached, the atmosphere at home grew increasingly tense. Heather began making pointed comments about academic elitists and people who think they're smarter than everyone else. My mother found endless ways to emphasize how difficult it would be to move abroad and questioned whether I was prepared for such a transition. My father alternated between dismissing the opportunity as impractical and suggesting that Heather's real world experience as a retail manager was equally valuable in its own way. None of this was new, but the intensity had escalated. For the first time, I sensed something beyond the usual dynamics. There was fear in their reactions, fear that I might actually succeed, that I might build a life that proved their limitations had been choices, not inevitabilities. Meanwhile, I threw myself into interview preparation. Professor Jenkins arranged mock interviews with other faculty members, drilling me on potential questions and helping me articulate the significance of my research. I devoured books about Oxford, familiarized myself with the work of the professors I hoped to study under, and practiced explaining complex urban development theories in accessible language. The financial implications of the fellowship weren't lost on me. Graduate school had seemed like an impossible dream, given my economic reality. Even with scholarships, I would have accrued significant debt pursuing a master's degree in the United States. The Thornfield Fellowship offered not just education, but freedom. Freedom from debt, from financial precarity, from the limitations that had shaped my family's choices. 2 weeks before the interview, Professor Jenkins called me into his office. What I expected to be another practice session turned out to be something different. Huh? Melanie, you're brilliant and deserving, and I have complete faith in your ability to win this fellowship, he said, his expression unusually serious. But I've been doing this long enough to know that success can sometimes trigger complications in family dynamics. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, feeling exposed. Had my careful compartmentalization of my family life been so transparent? All I'm saying is that you should take precautions with your important documents. Keep your passport, birth certificate, and other essentials somewhere secure, preferably outside your home. His words sent a chill through me, not because the advice was shocking, but because it articulated a fear I had been suppressing, that my family's pattern of undermining my opportunities might take a more active form when faced with the prospect of my permanent escape from their orbit. That evening, I carefully documented all my identification documents, taking clear photographs and storing them in a secure cloud account. I made copies of my passport, birth certificate, and social security card, keeping the originals in a locked box at Taylor's apartment. I researched emergency passport replacement procedures just in case. It felt paranoid. It felt disloyal. But as the interview date grew closer and the tension at home thickened, these precautions began to seem less like catastrophizing and more like prudent self-protection. 3 days before my scheduled flight to the East Coast for the Oxford interview, I went to retrieve my passport from my locked desk drawer. The small key turned easily, too easily. The drawer slid open to reveal neatly organized folders, reference letters, interview preparation materials, and an empty space where my passport should have been. My first reaction wasn't anger, but a strange, hollow recognition. Part of me had been expecting this, had been waiting for the moment when abstract family tension would crystallize into concrete sabotage. Still, expectation didn't soften the blow. I methodically searched my entire bedroom, checking every logical place a passport might be misplaced, other drawers, between books under my mattress, and coat pockets. Then I expanded to less logical locations: the bathroom, cabinet, kitchen drawers, the recycling bin. The passport was nowhere to be found. The house was empty when I began my search, but I heard the front door open and Heather's distinctive footsteps in the hallway. I took a deep breath and went to confront her. "Have you seen my passport?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Heather was slipping off her shoes, her back to me. There was the slightest pause in her movement before she turned her expression a perfect mask of innocence. "Your passport. Why would I have seen your passport?" "Because it's missing from my locked drawer and you're the only other person who's been in the house today." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Wow, straight to accusations. Maybe you misplaced it. Or maybe it was never in that drawer to begin with." "I checked it 2 days ago, specifically to make sure it was there." "Well, I don't have it." She brushed past me toward the kitchen, then turned with exaggerated concern. Wait, isn't your interview coming up? Don't you need that to travel? The feigned worry was so transparent it nearly took my breath away. I was saved from responding by my parents' arrival, grocery bags in hand. Mom, Dad, I said immediately. Someone took my passport from my locked drawer. I need it for my flight to the interview. My mother set down her bag slowly. Are you sure you put it there? You've been so scattered lately with all this Oxford business. I'm positive. I checked it 2 days ago. My father's expression hardened. That's a serious accusation, Melanie. Are you saying someone in this family stole from you? I'm saying my passport is missing and I need it in less than 72 hours. What followed was a masterclass in gaslighting. My mother suggested stress was affecting my memory. My father questioned whether I had ever actually had my passport in the drawer. Heather watched with wide, innocent eyes, occasionally offering unhelpful suggestions about where I might have, absent-mindedly, placed it. As the conversation progressed, I remembered something. Earlier that day, Heather had posted a selfie from her bedroom. In the background, partially visible on her nightstand, was the edge of what looked like a small blue booklet. I hadn't registered it at the time, but now I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, finding the post. The photo was gone, deleted sometime in the last few hours. You posted a selfie today, I said, interrupting my mother's suggestion that I check between my mattress and box spring. There was a blue booklet on your nightstand. Heather's face flushed, then paled. What are you talking about? I didn't post anything today. You deleted it, but I saw it this morning. My father stepped between us. That's enough, Melanie. Your sister said she doesn't have it. Then she won't mind if I check her room, I countered. Absolutely not, Heather exclaimed. I'm not having her go through my private things because she can't keep track of her own stuff. The argument escalated quickly. Accusations flew, old grievances were dredged up, voices raised. Through it all, I maintained a strange detachment, as if watching the scene from outside my body. This was the moment when all pretense would fall away, when the family dynamic that had shaped my life would finally be exposed in its raw form. It was my father who finally detonated the truth bomb. Red-faced and pointing his finger at me, he shouted, Maybe this is for the best. Some opportunities aren't meant for everyone, Melanie. Did you ever think this fancy scholarship might not be in your future for a reason? The room went silent. The statement hung in the air, revealing so much more than he had intended. This wasn't about a misplaced passport. This was about maintaining the family order, about keeping me in my assigned place. What your father means, my mother said softly, is that sometimes we need to be realistic about our place in the world. Oxford is for different kinds of people. What kinds of people? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Important people, connected people, not people from families like ours, my father said, no longer shouting, but somehow more devastating in his quiet certainty. You're setting yourself up for disappointment, reaching for things that aren't meant for you. Heather, sensing the shift in momentum, seized her moment. Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped forward. I did take it, she confessed, voice breaking, but only because I was worried about you. Moving to another country, leaving everything behind, I was scared you'd get there and be all alone when things didn't work out. And just like that, she transformed her sabotage into concern, her jealousy into sisterly love. My parents immediately encircled her with comfort. You should have talked to us first, sweetheart, my mother murmured, stroking her hair. Your heart was in the right place, my father assured her. I stood frozen, watching my sister sob in my parents' embrace, their backs literally turned to me and my shattered opportunity, the perfect tableau of our family truth. Where is it? I finally asked. Heather sniffled. I threw it away, in that public trash can at the park. I'm sorry, Melanie. I was just trying to protect you. I walked to my room without another word, closed the door, and for the first time since childhood, allowed myself to break down completely. I muffled my sobs with a pillow, my body shaking with grief, not just for the lost opportunity, but for the final confirmation of what I had always known, but tried to deny. My family did not want me to succeed if that success took me beyond them. When my tears were spent, I pulled out my phone and called Taylor. "They did it," I said when Taylor answered. "They actually did it." Did what happened. Heather took my passport and threw it away. My parents basically admitted they're glad she did it. Taylor's gasp came through the phone. "Oh my God! Are you serious? What are you going to do?" A strange calm settled over me as I realized I had been preparing for this moment for longer than I knew. "I'm going to activate the backup plan," I said, "and I'm going to get on that plane to the interview." This wasn't the first time Heather had sabotaged me, just the most significant. In elementary school, she had accidentally spilled juice on my book report the night before it was due. In high school, she had deleted my college application essay from the family computer, claiming she thought it was an old document. Each incident was dismissed as a mistake or misunderstanding, but the pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it. Professor Jenkins's warning about securing my documents hadn't come out of nowhere. He had witnessed a scene at a department event where my family had attended out of rare obligation. Heather had made dismissive comments about my academic achievements within his earshot, and my parents had laughed along. His suggestion to safeguard my passport had been diplomatic, but the concern behind it was rooted in what he had observed. What my family didn't know was that 6 months earlier, I had applied for a duplicate passport. My original had been approaching its expiration date, and rather than simply renewing it, I had reported it as damaged and requested a replacement while still retaining the old one. The new passport had been stored at Taylor's apartment since its arrival, along with copies of my birth certificate and other essential documents. The day after the confrontation, while my family was under the impression I was picking up extra shifts to distract myself from my missed opportunity, I met Taylor at a coffee shop across town. Are you sure about this?" Taylor asked, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was my duplicate passport, untouched and unknown to my family. "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied, checking the passport before securing it in my inner jacket pocket. "They finally showed me exactly who they are and what they think of me. I'd be a fool to ignore that clarity." Taylor had been more than just a holder of documents. Over the previous months, as the possibility of the Oxford opportunity grew more real, we had discussed contingency plans for various scenarios. We had researched emergency passport replacement, a process too lengthy for my current timeline, alternative travel arrangements, and budget options for last-minute necessities. I called in sick to work for the next 3 days," Taylor said. "I can drive you to the airport tomorrow. My cousin works for the airline and confirmed your ticket is still active." Beyond Taylor, I had cultivated a network of supportive figures who knew nothing of my family dynamics but were invested in my success. Professor Jenkins had arranged for a department alumnus to meet me at the airport upon arrival. Dr. Larson, my former psychology professor, had connected me with a friend who would provide accommodation the night before the interview, saving me the hotel cost. What had once felt like paranoid over preparation now seemed like prescient self-protection. I had built a safety net independent of my family, constructed by people who valued me for my mind and character rather than my compliance with their limitations. The logistical challenges remained significant. I had been saving for months, but my budget was tight. The original plan had included staying with a friend of my mother's cousin to save on accommodation costs, an arrangement now unavailable to me. I would need to use my emergency credit card for hotel expenses, adding debt I had hoped to avoid. Taylor insisted on lending me $300 to cover unexpected costs. "Consider it an investment in our friendship," she said when I protested. "You can pay me back when you're a famous Oxford scholar changing the world." That afternoon, I visited the campus counseling center where I had been receiving therapy for family-related anxiety for the past year. Dr. Chen, my counselor, helped me process my emotions and prepare mentally for the interview. "What you're experiencing is a common dynamic in families resistant to change," she explained. "Your success threatens the narrative they've constructed about themselves and their choices. It's not about you, it's about what your achievement reveals about their own limitations." How do I focus on the interview when all this is happening? I asked. Compartmentalization, she replied, not as a permanent solution, but as a temporary strategy. Create a mental container for the family situation, acknowledge it exists, and then deliberately set it aside to focus on your immediate goal. That evening, I sat in Taylor's apartment writing a letter to my family that I had no intention of sending. I poured out everything: the years of favoritism, the undermining of my achievements, the psychological impact of their constant diminishment, and finally the hurt of their recent betrayal. The act of articulating these truths was cathartic, even knowing the words would never reach their intended recipients. The next morning, long before dawn, Taylor picked me up at the corner 2 blocks from my house. I had slipped out silently with a small suitcase containing only what I needed for the interview. As we drove away from the neighborhood that had simultaneously nurtured and constrained me, I felt a complex mixture of grief, determination, and something unexpected freedom. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Where are you? We need to talk about yesterday." I switched my phone to airplane mode without responding. The time for family drama had passed. Now was the time to focus on the opportunity they had tried to deny me. The flight to Boston was just the first leg of a journey that would test my resilience in ways I hadn't anticipated. Budget constraints had forced me to book a connecting flight with a 4-hour layover in Chicago, followed by a shuttle bus to the university, rather than the more convenient but expensive taxi. What should have been a straightforward travel day stretched into an exhausting marathon. My carefully planned professional outfit had to be carried separately to prevent wrinkles. I survived on airport vending machine snacks to save money. The last shuttle of the day was delayed by traffic, leaving me anxiously checking the time as we inched toward campus. When I finally arrived at Cambridge University's imposing Gothic architecture, the sun was setting behind the historic buildings, casting long shadows across the courtyards. The campus exuded centuries of academic tradition, privilege, and achievement, a world apart from my community college beginnings and state university education. Other candidates were easily identifiable by their formal attire and portfolio cases similar to mine. They moved with the confidence of people accustomed to such prestigious environments, engaging in easy conversation about their research and previous academic accomplishments. Eavesdropping on their discussions about summers in Europe and undergraduate experiences at Ivy League institutions, I felt the familiar weight of imposter syndrome descending. "First time at Cambridge." A voice beside me belonged to a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a British accent. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Only because you're looking up at the architecture instead of pretending you've seen it all before," she said with a warm smile. "I'm Professor Whitman, one of the interview committee members." My heart raced at this unexpected encounter with one of the judges. "Melanie Preston," I managed, extending my hand. "It's beautiful here." "It is indeed, and even after 20 years, I still find myself looking up in wonder." She checked her watch. "You should get settled. Big day tomorrow." The interaction brief as it was settled something in me. Beneath the intimidating facade, there were real people who had once been newcomers themselves. I checked into my modest hotel, which was thankfully within walking distance of the interview location. The room was small but clean, with a desk where I spread out my materials and reviewed my talking points one last time. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, was flooded with messages. My parents had discovered my absence and cycled through concern, anger, and now guilt-inducing worry. Heather had constructed an elaborate narrative where she was suffering from remorse and anxiety over my disappearance. There were also messages of support from Taylor, Professor Jenkins, and other members of my chosen support network. I responded only to the supportive messages, confirming my safe arrival and expressing gratitude for their encouragement. To my family, I sent a single text: "I am safe and pursuing my opportunity. We'll contact you after the interview." Then I silenced my phone again, ordered a cheap dinner from a nearby sandwich shop, and focused on final preparations. In my hotel notebook, I wrote out answers to potential questions, particularly those about my research methodology and its practical applications for urban renewal. Sleep came fitfully that night. Each time I drifted off, I was jolted awake by anxiety dreams, where I arrived at the interview to find my family seated on the judging panel or discovered my presentation materials had been replaced with blank pages. By dawn, I had abandoned sleep altogether and was standing under the shower, letting hot water wash away the fatigue and tension. The interview was scheduled for 10 in the morning. I arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in my navy blue suit with a simple pearl necklace borrowed from Taylor, professional but not ostentatious. The waiting area outside the interview room contained 5 other candidates, each absorbed in last-minute review or quiet meditation. When my name was called, I smoothed my skirt and walked into a wood-paneled room where 5 people sat behind an imposing table. I recognized Professor Whitman, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. "Ms. Preston," began an older man at the center, "we've read your proposal on sustainable development in post-industrial communities with great interest. Please tell us what sparked your research in this direction." The question was one I had prepared for, and my answer flowed naturally. I spoke about growing up in a community transitioning from its manufacturing past, watching neighborhoods struggle with economic shifts, and how my academic interest had grown from lived experience. For 20 minutes, the questions were straightforward: academic inquiries, my methodology, my literature, review how my work built upon or challenged existing theories. I felt on solid ground, my preparation serving me well. Then came the question I hadn't fully anticipated. "Your academic record is impressive," said a woman with silver-streaked hair, "particularly given your transition from community college to university. Tell us about a significant obstacle you've overcome in your academic journey and how it has shaped your perspective." The room seemed to still. Here was the moment where my personal and academic lives collided. I could give a sanitized answer about financial challenges or time management between work and study, or I could offer the authentic truth that had brought me to this room against all odds. I chose authenticity. "My greatest obstacle has been overcoming the narrative limitations placed on me by my background," I began carefully. "I come from a family and community where advanced education is viewed with suspicion rather than aspiration, where pursuing knowledge for its own sake is considered impractical at best and pretentious at worst." I described the practical challenges working multiple jobs, navigating systems without familial guidance, but also the psychological barriers of having to believe in possibilities no one around me affirmed. "What I've learned," I continued, "is that the most difficult limits to transcend are the ones we internalize. My research on community transformation is inseparable from my personal experience of transformation, of recognizing that environments shape possibilities but don't have to determine them." I spoke without bitterness or self-pity, presenting my experience as data rather than drama. When I finished, there was a moment of silence before Professor Whitman spoke. "And how would you apply that understanding to the communities in your research?" The question allowed me to bridge my personal narrative back to my academic work, demonstrating how my lived experience informed my theoretical framework without dominating it. By the time the interview concluded, I sensed I had made an impression distinct from the other candidates. Whether that impression would translate to selection remained to be seen, but I had presented my authentic self and my work with integrity. Outside the interview room, I finally allowed myself to feel the weight of the past several days. The emotional toll of my family's betrayal, the logistical challenges of my secret journey, the pressure of the interview itself, it all crashed over me in a wave of exhaustion. I found a quiet corner of the campus garden and sat on a bench, allowing silent tears of release. When I checked my phone, there was a message from Taylor. "Whatever happens, you've already won by showing up. Also, your sister is telling everyone you had a mental health episode, and the family is very concerned." Classic. Despite everything, I laughed. The absurdity of my family's spin matched perfectly with their established patterns. Of course, they would reframe my determination as instability. Of course, they would cast themselves as concerned rather than sabotaging. For the first time, their narrative held no power over me. I had written my own story, and it was one of persistence rather than victimhood. The 2 weeks following the interview were an exercise in suspended animation. I returned home to a strange new family dynamic. My parents oscillated between cold disapproval and awkward attempts at reconciliation without accountability. "We were just worried about you," my mother would say, as if concern justified their actions. "You misunderstood our intentions," my father insisted, rewriting history in real time. Heather had crafted an elaborate narrative where she was both victim and hero, devastated by my misinterpretation of her protective actions, yet bravely forgiving my overreaction. She performed this role for extended family, portraying herself as the wounded party while simultaneously positioning herself as magnanimous. "I just want things to go back to normal between us," she said tearfully at dinner one night. "Family is more important than some scholarship." I maintained a careful distance emotionally and often physically. I picked up extra shifts at work, spent more time at Taylor's apartment, and engaged with my family only when necessary. When forced into conversation, I kept responses neutral and brief, neither accepting their revised version of events nor confronting them with my own. "You can't avoid us forever," my father said during one such interaction. "This silent treatment is childish." "I'm not avoiding anyone," I replied calmly. "I'm just busy with work and waiting for the committee's decision." My support network proved invaluable during this liminal period. Taylor's apartment became a sanctuary where I could process my feelings honestly. Professor Jenkins checked in regularly, reminding me that regardless of the scholarship outcome, I had demonstrated exceptional courage and determination. Dr. Chen helped me develop strategies for maintaining boundaries without escalating conflict. "What they're experiencing now is cognitive dissonance," she explained during one session. "Their actions contradict their self-image as supportive parents and a loving sister. Rather than adjust their self-perception, they're rewriting their actions to preserve their identity." "Will they ever acknowledge what really happened?" I asked. "Possibly with time and changed circumstances, but that acknowledgement may never come in the form you hope for. Your healing can't depend on their recognition of harm." On a Wednesday afternoon, 15 days after the interview, I was restocking the psychology textbook section at the campus bookstore when my phone vibrated with an unknown number. I nearly let it go to voicemail, assuming it was a spam caller, but some instinct made me answer. "Is this Melanie Preston?" asked a British-accented voice. Yes, this is she." "This is Professor Whitman from the Thornfield Fellowship Committee. I'm delighted to inform you that you've been selected as one of this year's 5 recipients." The textbook I had been shelving tumbled from my hands. Around me, the bookstore continued its normal afternoon rhythm, students browsing cashiers, scanning music playing softly overhead while my entire world shifted on its axis. "Ms. Preston, are you there?" "Yes, sorry," I managed. "I'm just surprised. Thank you so much." "Your interview was exceptional, and your research proposal shows remarkable promise. The committee was particularly impressed by your perspective on community transformation and your demonstrated resilience." After confirming details about next steps and upcoming orientation information, I ended the call and sank to the floor between the bookshelves, pressing my hands to my mouth to contain the sob of relief and vindication threatening to escape. I called Taylor first, who screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Then Professor Jenkins, who responded with a dignified, "Well-deserved, Melanie. Extraordinarily well-deserved." Dr. Larson sent a bouquet of flowers to my workplace with a card reading simply, "I always knew." That evening, a local news crew arrived at the bookstore as I was finishing my shift. The university had issued a press release about my selection, emphasizing the prestigious nature of the fellowship and the honor it brought to the school. The reporter asked basic questions about my research and my reaction to being selected. This fellowship represents not just an educational opportunity, but a chance to bring sustainable development solutions back to communities like the one I grew up in, I said, finding composure despite my inexperience with media. The segment aired on the 10 o'clock news, my face and name appearing beneath the headline, Local Student Wins Prestigious Oxford Fellowship. It was a brief piece, less than 2 minutes, but it sent ripples through my extended family and community. I arrived home that night to find my parents and sister sitting in the living room, the television still on, their expressions a complex mixture of shock, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear. "You won," my father stated flatly.
Yes.
"How did you—" Heather began, then stopped. "How did I get to the interview without my passport?" I completed her question. "I had a duplicate. I've had it for months." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "You planned for this. You expected us to—" "I hoped I was wrong," I said quietly. "I hoped I wouldn't need it." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken accusations and realizations. My father cleared his throat. "Well, this is unexpected, but congratulations, I suppose." "This calls for a celebration," my mother added with forced brightness. "I could make your favorite dinner tomorrow." Their attempts at normalcy, at pretending the betrayal had never happened, were almost more painful than the betrayal itself. They wanted to skip directly to reconciliation without acknowledgement to revision our family story without confronting its darker chapters. "Thank you, but I have plans tomorrow," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I should get some sleep. It's been a long day." In my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and allowed myself to fully absorb the reality I had done it. Despite every obstacle, despite my own family's active attempt to derail my future, I had secured a path forward that would fundamentally change the trajectory of my life. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from extended family members and old high school teachers who had seen the news. Many expressed surprise, having long ago accepted my family's minimization of my potential. A few admitted they had underestimated me. My high school counselor, who had discouraged me from applying to competitive colleges, wrote, "I clearly misjudged what you were capable of. Congratulations on proving me wrong." Amid these messages came one from my cousin Sarah, my mother's niece. "I always knew you were the exception in that household. Don't let them dim your light anymore. So proud of you, I could burst." That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in weeks, perhaps years. Whatever came next with my family, I had claimed my own narrative. I had refused to accept the limitations they tried to impose. That victory was even more significant than the fellowship itself. 1 year later, I stood on the ancient cobblestones of Oxford autumn leaves, swirling around my boots, hardly able to believe this was now my daily reality. The spires and courtyards that had once seemed impossibly distant were now familiar landmarks in my life. My small but comfortable graduate housing had become home decorated with carefully chosen items that represented my new beginning. The transition hadn't been easy. Beyond the academic adjustments, I had to navigate the complex evolution of my family relationships from 3,000 miles away. Distance provided clarity, but also challenges in establishing new boundaries. After the fellowship announcement, my family had cycled through various strategies to regain equilibrium without true accountability. There were guilt trips, "We barely hear from you anymore," minimization, "Every family has disagreements," and attempts to reframe the narrative, "We always believed in you, we were just worried." I had chosen a middle path between complete estrangement and unconditional forgiveness. Our contact was limited, but not severed, our conversations civil, but not intimate. I called once every 2 weeks, keeping the discussions focused on general life updates rather than deeper emotions. When they asked about my studies, I shared only surface details, protecting my academic life from their potential diminishment. "You're different now," my mother said during one video call. "More distant." I'm the same person," I replied. "But yes, our relationship is different. It had to be." My approach was not punishment, but self-preservation. I could maintain connection without sacrificing my well-being or compromising my truth. The relationship now operated on my terms, not theirs, a fundamental shift in our family power dynamic. Heather took longer to reach out than my parents. 6 months into my time at Oxford, an email appeared in my inbox with her name. "I I don't know how to start this, she wrote. I've written and deleted this email 100 times. What I did was unforgivable. I've been seeing a therapist who's helping me understand why I've always felt threatened by your success. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just telling you I'm trying to be better. I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. It wasn't a perfect apology, there were still traces of self-pity, but it represented the first real acknowledgement of harm from any family member. I responded simply, "Thank you for this email. It means a lot to hear. I'm glad you're talking to someone. I am too." Our subsequent communications were cautious but gradually more authentic. She asked questions about Oxford that seemed genuinely interested rather than competitive. She shared her own new Path Community College courses in education, inspired partly by rethinking what success looks like for me. My parents' journey toward recognition of their role in our dysfunctional dynamic was slower and less explicit. There were no grand apologies or dramatic moments of insight. Instead, there were small shifts, my father asking substantive questions about my research rather than dismissing it. My mother sending care packages without accompanying guilt trips, both of them mentioning my accomplishments to friends and family without the usual qualifiers and diminishments. During my first holiday visit home, the changes were subtle but noticeable. My academic awards were displayed alongside Heather's retail management certificates. Conversations included space for my experiences without immediate redirection to Heather's activities. These weren't the transformative reckonings of movie scripts, but real-world adjustments of deeply ingrained patterns. My own healing journey continued with weekly video sessions with a therapist specializing in family dynamics. Dr. Rivera helped me process not just the passport incident, but the lifetime of messages that had preceded it. The most damaging aspect of family dysfunction isn't usually the dramatic moments, she explained, but the accumulated effect of thousands of small interactions that teach you to doubt your worth and potential. Gradually, I learned to identify and counter the internalized beliefs formed in that environment that my achievements came at someone else's expense, that wanting recognition was selfish, that exceeding my family's expectations was somehow disloyal. The academic and social environment at Oxford provided the perfect context for this growth. I was surrounded by people who took intellectual curiosity for granted, who celebrated rather than resented achievement, who viewed ambition as natural rather than threatening. My research cohort became a kind of chosen family, offering the peer support and validation I had never experienced growing up. My work flourished in this nurturing atmosphere. My research on sustainable community development expanded to include international comparative studies, incorporating insights from urban renewal projects across Europe. I published my first academic paper 6 months into the program, presented at 2 international conferences, and was invited to join a prestigious research group focused on equitable urban transitions. Beyond academics, I developed a program connecting first-generation college students with mentors who shared similar backgrounds. Drawing on my own experience, I created workshops addressing the unique challenges faced by students navigating educational environments without family models or support. The initiative quickly expanded from Oxford to partner universities, eventually developing into a formal nonprofit organization. When I returned home for Christmas during my second year, I brought a different energy with me. I was no longer the daughter desperately seeking approval, but a young woman with purpose and direction offering connection but not requiring validation. The power shift was palpable. "You carry yourself differently," my father observed over coffee one morning. "More, I don't know." "Confident," I suggested. He nodded, something like respect in his expression. "I didn't understand what you were reaching for before. I do now." It wasn't an apology, but in our family's limited emotional vocabulary, it was significant an admission that his perception had been flawed, that he had failed to see my potential. Later that visit, my mother helped me sort through old belongings in my childhood bedroom. As we organized papers and mementos, she paused over a middle school essay marked with a teacher's enthusiastic praise. "You were always so smart. she said softly. I think I was intimidated by it. I didn't know how to nurture something I didn't understand. It's not too late to learn, I replied, meeting her eyes. I'm still here. These small moments of connection and recognition didn't erase the past harm, but they created possibilities for a different kind of future relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than prescribed roles on seeing each other as we are rather than as we're expected to be. The greatest lesson I've learned through this journey is that family relationships, like all relationships, must be negotiated rather than simply inherited. Love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's submission. True connection requires the freedom to define ourselves beyond others' limitations, to create space for growth, even when that growth challenges established dynamics. I've also learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. I can acknowledge the harm my family caused while still appreciating the complex humans behind those actions. I can maintain healthy boundaries while leaving room for evolution and growth. Most importantly, I've learned that some relationships must be transformed rather than abandoned, reimagined on new terms that honor everyone's humanity without compromising anyone's dignity. Today, as I walk through Oxford's historic quadrangles, I carry both my wounds and my wisdom. The passport incident, painful as it was, gave me the final push to claim my own path unapologetically. It forced me to recognize that the greatest act of self-love is believing in your path even when those who should support you the most cannot see your light. Your dreams don't require anyone's permission, they just need your unwavering commitment. Have you ever had to believe in yourself when those closest to you couldn't see your potential? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of overcoming family obstacles resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Remember, the limitations others place on you are often reflections of their own fears, not your true capabilities. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to pursue your dreams even when the path isn't easy.